I've lived with type 1 diabetes for close to 27 years now, and I can tell you this, I've made a lot of mistakes on the way. But I've also learned a lot about myself, my diabetes, I've grown a ton, and I've adopted some solid diabetes habits that now help me keep my A1C below 6%. I'm not gonna lie and say that diabetes is easy or that it's not a lifelong learning curve, but I do believe that it becomes easier when you adapt diabetes habits that works for you. So let me give you a shortcut to an easier life with diabetes by sharing my 7 diabetes habits that I wish I learned sooner. And because there's also no reason for either of us to do this on our own, I asked you guys to share the most important diabetes habits that you have learned in my community tab. And you delivered. So of course, I'll include your advice and experience as well at the end of this video. Habit number 1 is to not strive for perfection. I'll dare the statement that aiming for perfection, so non-diabetic blood sugars 24/7 year-round, is not the way to success for most people. And I know some will watch this video and think this is bonkers advice, and that's okay. I did say most people, not all people. I'm pretty happy with my A1C, my medical team is happy with my A1C, and I also have a fairly good time in range. My time in range is fairly consistently around 85%, which is right where I want it. Time in range indicates how much time is my blood sugar between 70 and 180 milligrams per deciliter. But that also means that 15% of the time, my blood sugar is either below 70 or above 180. I'm okay with that. I don't want my blood sugars to linger at those outer positions, but a quick visit is okay in my book. So what I do instead is that I set realistic goals for me and I do my best to meet them. I refuse to beat myself up for not being able to act exactly like a pancreatic system. I want to be able to live my life and I want to have the freedom to not have to think about my blood sugars every second of the day. Habit number 2 is to measure your blood sugars frequently. Or if you have a CGM, check it at the right time and set appropriate alerts. It's not just about measuring blood sugars frequently, it's about measuring blood sugars at the right time so that you know if your treatment plan is working. I think it's important that we accept that our diabetes is on us. As someone living with diabetes, we have to take charge, we have to manage it. We can't rely on our medical teams. They can give guidance, but they're not with us on a day-to-day basis. As a minimum, I think it's important that we establish a habit around measuring our blood sugars or checking our CGMs. For example, in the morning as well as before bed, before meals, an hour and a half to 2 hours after meals, and then we do some spot checks between meals, for example in the afternoon. I don't see these blood sugar readings as if I'm being graded or if I'm being judged, but rather as a piece of information that I can use to help manage my diabetes and make changes if needed. As mentioned, I live with type 1 diabetes, so I have to manage my blood sugars using insulin. I use these blood sugar readings to assess whether or not I need to adjust my insulin levels, or if I want to, for example, cut back on some of the foods that I'm eating. Not because I have to, but because for me, not all foods are worth the blood sugar headache. If you manage your blood sugars through exercise and diet, or maybe even with tablets such as metformin, these blood sugar readings can help you assess whether or not you want to change up what you're eating, maybe you want to work a bit on your portion sizes, or maybe this information is telling you that some of the things that you're eating are just not worth it from a blood sugar perspective. And then of course you can use your blood sugar readings to inform your medical team. Getting an A1C measured every 3 to 6 months is great, but remember that's an average and it does not identify when to potentially make changes. Maybe your blood sugars are only running high in the morning or in the evening. An A1C test will not help you identify that. Blood sugar measurements will. And then you can take that to your doctor and you can discuss, well, how do you fix this? Measuring your blood sugars that many times a day, poking your finger, can be a pain in the neck. It can be expensive, I know it. I also know that not everyone has access to a CGM, but if you can get your hands on one, even just one, I highly recommend it. A CGM will allow you to see your blood sugars 24/7 without having to poke your fingers. You'll get that information even when you're sleeping. There are a few ways to get one for free. You might only get one, but I still think it's beneficial. You can get a lot of information from wearing a sensor those 10 to 14 days. You can ask your doctor if they have a sample CGM that you can try. Some doctors will have Freestyle Libre or Dexcom sample sensors that they can give to patients. You can also request a try before you buy sensor from the manufacturer. I've done that successfully with the Freestyle Libre sensor here in the US. I do not know if that works outside the US. They do have some different requirements. You have to have a type 1, type 2, or gestational diabetes diagnosis, and you still need a prescription from your doctor. There are some new Freestyle Libre sensors that just got FDA approved to be sold over the counter, but I don't think they're available yet as part of this program. Habit number 3 ties into habit number 2, and that is to pay attention to how what you eat and drink impacts your blood sugars. That sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, the thing is that different types of foods and certain meal compositions will impact blood sugars differently. And the time of day can also have an impact. See, I did not know all of this back when I was diagnosed with diabetes. So if you just measure your blood sugars after meals without thinking about what you ate or when, those blood sugar readings might look really random. The thing is, diabetes is not random. We might not understand what's going on all the time, but that does not mean that it's random. My approach to make blood sugar readings after meals make more sense is to be very structured with what I eat, at least for a period of time. I try to do my best to stick to the same type of meal at the same time of day for at least a few days, and then I write down how it impacts my blood sugars. Does it make them soar up, stay relatively flat, or maybe it makes my blood sugar rise over several hours? Say I notice that a certain time of meal at a certain time of day makes my blood sugar spike. Well, there's a few different things I can do. Since I manage my blood sugars using insulin, I can change my insulin dose or the timing of that insulin dose. I can maybe work on my portion size, maybe reduce it a little bit, or I can look at my meal composition. If I add some fats, some proteins, that will slow down how fast glucose gets released into the bloodstream. Maybe that will fix the spike, or I can choose to simply not eat this type of meal. See, in my opinion, it's not just about cutting things out of our life. It's about making informed decisions and then figuring out what works best for each of us. And this habit has made that possible for me. But I also found that it's important to establish a habit around not just focusing on what I eat and drink. And doing that has made a huge difference for my diabetes management. And that is habit number 4, to pay attention to other things than just to what you eat and drink. The reality is that many things can impact your blood sugars aside from what you eat and drink or what blood sugar lowering meds that you might be taking. Actually, upward of 42 things can impact blood sugars, and I think this is one of the main reasons why diabetes can seem really random at times. I think it makes perfect sense to start with a focus on food, drinks, and your meds, since those are most often the things that will impact your blood sugars the most aggressively. But I think it's a mistake to stop there and not have a habit in place that allows you to think broader. I have a checklist, so I don't think anyone expects you to remember all 42 things that can impact your blood sugars or know how all 42 impact your blood sugars. So what I do is that I have a short list of things from that list that I know will impact my blood sugars the most aggressively. And then I'll go through those in my mind when I evaluate my diabetes management. The situation where I most often use this list is if my blood sugars are running high and it's unexpected. So it's situations where I don't think the food that I ate warrants such a high blood sugar, and I'm pretty sure that I dosed my insulin correctly. I'll go through my list and I'll try to identify why is my blood sugar running high and how to fix it. First thing I think about is my exercise pattern. I usually exercise most days, but if I, for whatever reason, am not exercising, my insulin sensitivity will tank. My insulin sensitivity is how effective is my body at utilizing the insulin that I inject. When my insulin sensitivity is low, I need more insulin. Then I think about my overall sleep and stress levels. If those are high, that can also reduce my insulin sensitivity. Next, I assess my hydration. Yes, you guessed that right. If you're dehydrated, that can also tank insulin sensitivity. Finally, if I don't think it's any of those things, I will try and assess whether or not my insulin has gone bad. It's a little tricky because you can't necessarily look at your insulin and see if it has gone bad, but if it has been exposed, for example, to too hot or too cold temperatures, this can reduce its ability to actually lower blood sugars. I don't throw it out right away, but I'll change to different pen or cartridge and see if that makes a difference. If you use an insulin pump, you can start by doing a manual injection to assess if it's the insulin or maybe the infusion site that's not working optimally. There are a few different reasons on why insulin can go bad, such as it being expired or maybe being exposed to too hot or too cold temperatures. I use insulin coolers to keep my insulin at the right temperature. This is one of my favorites. This is the 1 pen cooler from For All Family. It fits both a cartridge as well as my insulin pen, and it's lightweight, TSA approved, and I just think it's a perfect little cooler for when on the go. I'll leave a link to where you can find the cooler down below this video in the video description. Moving on to my 5th habit, and that is to wipe the idea of free foods from my mind and view everything that I eat as having a potential blood sugar impact. I remember being at a diabetes event years ago, and someone looked at me in complete surprise as I was dosing insulin for a salad. She was completely baffled because she would never do that. I'm not saying that she should, but the thing is, I know that a bowl of salad, even without dressing, will impact my blood sugars. I do often add a protein, which is probably why I see a bit of a blood sugar impact. It's not huge, but it's large enough that I want to do something about it. Same thing with nuts. If I eat more than a few, my blood sugars will go up. Remember, as someone who lives with type 1 diabetes and have for a very long time, I do not have an insulin production. If you do, your body is still producing insulin, which means that you might not see a blood sugar impact from smaller meals. But that's not the point though. The point is that we have to measure our blood sugars, we have to pay attention, and we have to accept that some foods, even in small quantities, will impact our blood sugars even if it has been presented as a free food. Same goes for coffee. I have a whole video on why coffee can raise blood sugars and which is the best one to choose. But in general, some people will see a blood sugar impact from coffee, even from black coffee, and some people won't. Another solid habit that I adopted fairly early on is to stay active. I'm not gonna lie, staying active is not really a big issue for me as I've always been active. I grew up in Denmark. I've been used to riding everywhere on my bicycle, playing sports, and later going to the gym. And having established habits around being active also makes it easier to stay active. But that doesn't mean that you can't get started, regardless of your age or if you have any restrictions. But before I give you a few tips on how to establish an exercise routine, let me just try and convince you on why this is such a powerful habit. Well, exercise is probably the most effective tool, aside from meds, to improve your insulin sensitivity here and now, as well as in the long run. It's your golden ticket to reducing your blood sugars. Yep, and it can be a completely free way of lowering your blood sugars. No gym membership needed. The easiest way to use movement is to go for a walk or do a little dance after your meals. According to some studies, it can take as little as 2 minutes of activity after a meal to see an impact. In my experience, a 10-minute burst of activity is more effective. And if you want a more prolonged improvement of your insulin sensitivity, you can build some muscles. This can be done in the gym or at home, whatever works for you. Some good at-home starter exercises are squats and push-ups. Just respect your starting point. So if you cannot do a push-up on your toes, do them on your knees. If you cannot do a push-up on your knees, do them against the wall. As long as you find them challenging, they're working. Back when I used to train people, I'd always tell them, my goal is to make you enjoy this. I want you to come back and do it again. My goal is not to scare you away. So how did I do that? How did I actually make it fun for people and convert it into a routine or a habit? First thing is to set a goal and remember to think about your starting point. Are you very inactive? Are you already running 5K? Do you have any injuries? That starting point will determine your initial goal. If you're very inactive or injured, start slow. Maybe the goal is 5 2-minute bursts of activity throughout the day. Just set some alarms on your phone. And if you're already running a 5K a week, maybe just add a day of resistance training or aim at moving more the remaining 6 days of the week. Start with one thing, preferably something that you actually think is fun. For example, I'd much rather dance than go for a run. And force yourself to do that daily. In the beginning, it won't be fun. It'll be hard. But as you continue to do it, it'll become a habit. And then maybe one day, you'll find yourself just going for a walk or do a little dance after meals without even having to push yourself. Before we get to all of these habits that you guys shared with me in the community tab, let me share my 7th habit with you, and that is to not compare my diabetes journey or results to others. That one has required a bit more mental work, but I'm getting there. You might be looking at mine or someone else's A1C and how we manage our diabetes thinking you can do better or that you're doing worse. I've been there and I highly recommend that you get out of that mind space. My diabetes is not the same as your diabetes. Well, some things are of course universal. Blood sugars go up, blood sugars go down. If you do not have an insulin production, you have to inject insulin. My point is that if you and I managed our blood sugars in the exact same way, we might not both be successful. It's something that I'm also happy to see more medical professionals understand. They've started to believe in individualized care being the way forward rather than a one-size-fits-all. That's also why you'll never hear me dish out all or nothing type of content. I just don't believe in there only being one way of being successful. But I do think we can learn from each other, and I'm guessing that you're agreeing since you're watching this video. What I do is that I listen and I learn, and sometimes I pick up new tricks or tips from others and I try them out. And sometimes I listen to people's success and I applaud them and then I just move on. And those were my 7 diabetes habits that I wish I learned earlier on and it has really helped me with my diabetes management. But I also asked you, what habits do you want to highlight? So let's have a look. 330 people voted in my little quiz here, and my question was, what is the most important diabetes habits that you had to learn? And the majority says it's habits around food. We also have a little bit of mental health habits. And actually, when I went down in the comments, that was the main thing that was brought up. It was habits around mental health. And you know what? It's something that I don't think is talked enough about. So we do have a lot of resources on the Diabetes Strong website. You can just go in on the website, you can click mental health, and you can see some different mental health resources here. I hope you found my habits helpful. If you have incorporated a habit that you think has been exceptionally helpful, please let us all learn from you. Leave a comment down below this video. These habits are a bit more general. If you want to dig in and learn some solid habits around reducing blood sugar spikes after meals, I do have some tips and tricks I want to share. Check out this video to learn 8 habits to avoid blood sugar spikes after meals. If you like this video and would like to see more from me, remember to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. That way you'll never miss a thing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.